Hi, my name is Zia Hunter, and I want to talk about systematic racism and ending systematic racism. Systematic racism is racism embedded as normal practice in our everyday lives, and systematic racism contributes to individual, institutional, and structural forms of racism. This was said by Joe Fagan in Racist America: Roots, Current Realities, and Future Reparations. Systematic racism includes the complex array of anti-Black practices that unjustly gained political economic power of whites, the continuing economic and other resource inequalities along racial lines, and the white racist ideologies and attitudes created to maintain and rationalize white privilege and power. Systemic here means that the core racist realities are manifested in each of society's major points, each major part of U.S. society: the economy, politics, education, religion. The family reflects the fundamental reality of systematic racism. Even though Joe Fagan developed a theory based on the history and the reality of anti-Black racism in the U.S., it applies to understanding how racism functions both within the U.S. and outside the U.S. and around the world. I feel racism is broken down into 7 major elements: the impoverishment of people of color and enrichment of white people, the vested group interests among white people, alienating racist relations between white people and people of color. The costs and burdens of racism are borne by people of color. The power of racist ideas, assumptions, and worldviews. Resistance to racism and systematic racism is all around us and within us. The impoverishment of people of color and enrichment of white people is explained as like undeserving poverty of people of color is the basis of undeserving white enrichment, which is a core aspect of systematic racism. This includes the role that slavery played in creating an unjust wealth for white people, their businesses, and their family. It also includes the way white people exploited labor throughout the European colonies prior to the founding of the United States. These historical practices created a social system that had racist economic inequality built into its foundation and has followed through the years in numerous ways. Undeserving poverty also results from people of color being forced into unfavorable mortgages rates, being channeled by unequal opportunities for education into low-wage jobs, and being less paid by white people than being less paid than white people for doing the same job. And for example, gentrification is a big one. Gentrification is basically in a normal neighborhood, and it's been the same way for 30 years, and you kind of see it changing and becoming more modernized by people who are not from this neighborhood, people who really aren't from around the area. My experience with gentrification is in my town home in South Dallas, in Dallas, Texas. There has been, over about the last 2 to 3 years, there has been a lot of, modernized houses that really don't belong, and the people that live inside these houses aren't from South Dallas at all. And there are people who have been in South Dallas for 40 plus years who are being pushed out because, who are being pushed out because their mortgage rates are going higher because of the gentrification of the area. Another example for gentrification has been a video that I recently seen of a white woman in Brooklyn, New York, a very mixed with people of color area. And she basically tried to go off on a 6-year-old child who was riding a little bike. He literally had to be 6, and she basically said some things to him, and someone came to her and just let her know, hey, these are these kids' playground. They have been here for years. Their families have been here for years. These are these children's playgrounds, and this is where they play. You can't get mad at them because this is their playground. You are not from here. You have no power to come and change what we've been having going on for years. Vested group interests among white people. White people enjoy many privileges denied to people of color. Among these is the way that vested group interests among powerful white people and ordinary white people allow white people to benefit from their racial identity without even identifying as such. Being white doesn't really matter if you're poor white or you're rich white. It's just sometimes you're just all embedded into one term, and that's being white, and it doesn't matter if you're poor white. For example, a couple months ago there was a protest for a black man named Jacob Blake who was shot by police multiple times for trying to break up a fight between two women. He had his kids in the car. He was completely unarmed. He was just trying to break up the fight. And during the protests for that injustice, a 17-year-old white teen went to the protest with a AR-15 rifle and shot 3 people. He killed one person and he injured one person and killed 2. And he was apparently walking with the police at 2, and he got the chance to go home that night and didn't get arrested till the next morning. And I just want to compare that to 12-year-old Tamir Rice, who was a black kid who was killed by police because he had a play gun. And the call that went out before he was shot was that, someone has a play gun, someone has a gun, but it's probably fake. They just let it be known that the gun is probably fake. He was 12 years old. This boy did not look 15. He didn't look 16. He didn't even look 20. He looked like a 12-year-old little boy. And he was shot that day. He did not see another day. But Kyle Rittenhouse is going back and forth to court. Alienating racist relations between people and people of color. White people hold most positions of power in America. Membership of Congress, the leadership of colleges and universities, the top management of corporations make this clear. In this context in which white people hold political, economic, cultural, and social power, the racist views and assumptions that course through U.S. society shape the way that those in power interact with people of color. This leads to a serious and well-documented problem of routine discrimination in all areas of life, frequent dehumanization and marginalization of people of color, including hate crimes, which serves to alienate them from society and hurt their overall life chances. For example, a middle schooler named Xavier Davis was suspended because of his haircut, which he had had for 6 months. He walked into class. His teacher said, "Oh no, you have to go to the office because you have 2 lines in your haircut," which seems a bit petty. It does seems a little bit petty, and that it distracted him and other kids from the overall lesson of school. And I just felt like being a middle schooler, that's something that you shouldn't be penalized for, a haircut. When usually you don't pay for your haircut in middle school. You have a parent who usually chooses your haircut and pays for it. There was also another situation in South Carolina where a black teen girl was flipped over a desk by the police officer that was in the school area because she was disrupting class. In any situation should there be a teen being flipped over by a police officer because she's disrupting class. There's so many steps that could have gone through, before going straight to being flipped over by a police officer for disrupting class. It seems these punishments seem a bit extreme for the crimes that are being done, or offenses, because I wouldn't call them crimes. The costs and burdens of racism are borne by people of color. The costs and burdens of racism are disproportionately borne by the people of color, and black people especially. Having to deal with unjust costs and burdens is a core aspect of systematic racism. These include shorter lifespans, which I actually want to kind of relate that to black people dually don't have access to the same health care that others do. And during racism time, because during slavery time, because black people were given the leftovers of the animal and the leftovers of the food, we usually have a lot of fat in our diet, which led to, a lot of black people have diabetes and high blood pressure. I'm sorry, but the burdens and costs of racism are borne by people of color and those include shorter lifespans, limited income and wealth potential, impacted family structure as a result of mass incarceration of Black and Latino people, limited access to educational resources and political participation in state-sanctioned killing by police, and the psychological, emotional, and community tolls of living with less and being seen as less than. For example, it is a known fact that Black men would get a longer sentence than a white man for the same crime. Another thing that I mentioned when I included, things that we have to pay for and are burdened with because of racism is, the family structure due to incarceration. We have a lot of Black men who have been, in jail for many of years because of small offenses such as drugs or, non-violent crimes, 20 plus years or 10 plus years. State-sanctioned killing by police is another one that I would like to talk about, with a lot of Black people have been killed by police officers unjustly without having weapons on them. And, this summer, you're seeing as people protest for Black Lives Matter and, defunding the police because it seems as if the police are using their power and not the right way. And, police officers were actually created because they used to be slave catchers and they thought of another way to control Black people. The racial power of white elites, which is another way of saying white supremacy, has been understood as the belief that white people are superior to people of color. For this reason, it is important that the public hold white elites accountable for combating racism and fostering equality. It is equally important that those that hold positions of power within society reflect the racial diversity of the U.S. The U.S. is very diverse, but, to other people, all you would see is, from other countries, all you would see is white, and you would think that U.S. is completely nothing but white people. For example, another example of white supremacy would be MAGA, Make America Great Again marchers were recently in D.C. vandalizing and tearing things apart due to the loss of Donald Trump to Joe Biden. And, they weren't getting a lot of backlash from police. While protesters in D.C. this summer were trapped by police, and then police started, firing tear gas, and they were trapped and had to run people's house. They were trapped and had to run in people's houses for protection from police officers. I was actually protesting this summer in D.C. and the police officers were very aggressive with the people, and to see the MAGA marchers not get touched at all was very mind-boggling, and I was really trying to figure out how that was even fair. The power of racist ideas and assumptions and worldviews. Racist ideology, the collection of ideas and assumptions and worldviews, is a key component of systematic racism and plays a key role in its reproduction. Racist ideology often asserts that white people are superior to people of color for biological or cultural reasons. It manifests in stereotypes, prejudices, and popular myths and beliefs. These typically include positive images of whiteness in contrast to negative images associated with people of color, such as there was a Dove commercial where there was a Black woman and she showered with Dove soap, and when she came out of the shower, she was a white woman. And that kind of makes me compare it to the term white is right, where there's always been this theme of whiteness being more superior to any type of color. And yes, Resistance to racism. Resistance to racism is an important feature of systematic racism. Racism has never been passively accepted by those who suffer it, and so systematic racism is always accompanied by acts of resistance that might manifest as protests, political campaigns, and legal battles, resisting white authority figures and speaking back against white stereotypes, beliefs, and language. The white backlash that typically follows resistance, like countering Black Lives Matter with All Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter, does the work of limiting effects of resistance and maintaining a racist system. The reason why all lives matter is never okay to say, because yes, all lives do matter. Everyone knows this. All lives, I am a firm believer that all lives do matter, but all lives aren't in danger. All lives aren't being killed for not having a weapon on them, or killed every day because of nothing. Black people are. We have been dealt the bad hand for many years. And that's why I believe that Black lives matter. Yes, Black lives matter right now because they are the ones endangered. Systematic racism is all around us and within us. Over 100 years, racism is in fact built into the foundation of the U.S. society, and that it has over time come to infuse all aspects of it. It is present in our laws, our politics, our economy, and our social institutions, and in how we think and act, whether consciously or subconsciously. It's all around us and inside of us. And for this reason, resistance to racism must also be everywhere. We need to combat it.